Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined, they're built brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
Welcome back to the Big Life Podcast. I'm Neal Oates Jr. and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Robin Lewis. How are you doing today?
Hey, doing great, sir. Good to be back here with you and with our audience.
Indeed, it is a good, dare we say, great thing to be back. Robin, today we're unpacking a skill that will change the way people see you and the way you see yourself, long before you ever say a word, and that's owning the room.
Owning the room, folks. I love this topic because most people think that presence is just about what you say, once you start talking. But the reality is that people are making judgments in seconds based upon what they see, what they feel, and what they sense about you before you say one word.
And so, Robin, that's a very honest thing to say. And we don't have to like it, but we have to be aware of this fact. And those judgments that they make can either work for you or against you. And that's why presence is so powerful. It creates a foundation for how people will receive what you say and how they respond to you.
Yes, so let's kind of define what we mean by presence, right? Let's start with what the owning the room does not mean. It's not about being the loudest or the most animated or the most dramatic person in the space. That's not what we're talking about.
Exactly correct, Robin. And it's not about forcing yourself to be on all the time. Presence is about congruence. I mean, your physical stance, your energy, your facial expressions, and your mindset all sending a unified, intentional message. And that message should be, I belong here and I have value to contribute.
So Neal, how are we doing today? Do you think we're portraying that message that we belong here and we have value to contribute to our listeners today?
Well, I do believe there's congruence. I came in with my facial expression working. I had my mental, my physical presence. So I'm going to say that out of 10, I think we're at 11. I think we're in 11 out of 10 today.
I
Robin.
like it. I like it, sir. And here's something that I've learned, folks. You can be soft-spoken and still own the room. Some of the most commanding people barely raise their voices, yet you can feel their presence.
And so you're absolutely correct there, Robin. I think of my mom as one of those people. And that's because true presence is built from the inside out. And if you're grounded in who you are, that's a key. If you're grounded in who you are, you won't need to overcompensate, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And people can sense that authenticity instantly. So what I've learned that helps me own a room is really the 3 pillars of presence, Robin. And I think this is a great place for us to share this with our audience. So I think of presence as resting on 3 pillars, and that's the physical, the mental, and relational pillars.
And I like it. The physical presence is obviously the most visible. So here we're talking about your posture, your eye contact, your facial expressions, how you move, right? This is the first data point. This is the first thing that people are going to collect about you, your physical presence.
And that's one that, be it good or bad, Robin, if we don't have that physical presence down, we could immediately turn someone off and we might miss opportunities. What do you think about that part?
Yeah, I agree 100%.
All right, so second, there is the mental presence, and I don't believe this one gets as much attention, but it should. And mental presence is about the inner game, your level of self-belief, your clarity about why you're in that room, and then your preparation before you ever arrive.
Yeah, it's so good and so true. And we talk about that quite a bit here on the podcast. But, it's obvious your mental, your mindset, as we recently shared, your perspective causes you to own the space or maybe not, right? Depending upon how you show up.
Hold on.
And
So,
then
Robert, I love the way that you went to the optimistic side, the positive side, assuming that we have our mental in the right direction, right? In
yes,
the right place. You're
yes,
like, yeah,
yes.
you're mental. But the reality is, up until this point, maybe it has not allowed us to own the room because we didn't do that mental prep work initially.
Sometimes that's the reality. If I can be honest, sometimes I
Yeah.
don't have the right mental mindset. I have to stop, pause, and adjust. Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, clearly very important. The third one that Neil mentioned is relational. So, relational presence is about connection. We talk about this one a lot also. This is about how you acknowledge people, right? How you make them feel seen and special even before you start a formal conversation.
And I think all three of those are key, and here's why. Because if any of those three pillars are missing, your presence feels incomplete. And I think that we've all experienced that in the past where it just didn't click. But when they're all working together, you can shift the energy in a space just by walking in. And Robin, this is where my dad would often say that we have the choice of either being a thermometer or a thermostat,
Yeah, I
right? And
love
so a
it.
thermometer just reads the temperature in the room. A thermostat has the ability to change the temperature in the room, to change the environment. So if things are too cool, we can heat them up. If it's too heated, we can cool them down. And I believe our presence, when everything is working together, can do that exact same thing.
I agree 100%. And I'm sure our listeners have been in situations like that where their presence has done that one way or the other. We've lived this. We live this all the time because
Yeah.
our presence is there. However, we bring it. What we're trying to talk about today, folks, is to share how we can be intentional about owning that space. The reality is, we own that space anyway. The difference might be how are we affecting the space,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Some people might hear this and Neil, they might think, well, as long as my content or my work is strong, then my presence shouldn't matter that much. If I just bring my good stuff, then that should be all that really counts. But that's not the reality, right?
I wish that was the end all be all, because you and I, we could just put our work out into the world and then it didn't matter how we showed up. But that's the myth of merit alone. And here's the truth, fortunately and unfortunately. People often decide whether to listen, to trust, or to follow you based on how you show up before they've evaluated your skills or message. So that thing that we're relying on, Robin, that you just mentioned, our work, our skill, they might not even give that a chance. It's on you and your presence.
Yeah. So think about a first impression with a potential client or maybe an investor or a partner. If your presence communicates confidence and respect and readiness, you're already halfway to the yes, right, Neil?
Robin, and I love that, because if we're intentional, it works for us. But you said if it communicates those things, but it also works in the reverse. So if your presence says I'm unsure or I don't belong here, you'll have to work twice as hard to earn back credibility. So we could either be halfway there or twice as far away.
Yeah, so true. And so Neil, we're always trying to be transparent with our audience. So can you share a time when your presence created opportunity before you even spoke?
So you've mentioned a word already, and it is intentionality, right? Being intentional about how we show up. And so for me, I was at a luxury real estate networking event. I walked in and I didn't know most of the room. I made sure, though, that my energy matched the space. I was confident but approachable. I dressed correct. I did the mental work before I walked into the room. And by the time I introduced myself to a few people, they were already leaning in. They were curious about what I had to say. And that experience led to a speaking invitation and 3 high value client introductions. And it's all because I did as you suggested. I intentionally plan on what my presence would be when I walked into the room. And so, Robin, you asked me. Now I have to ask you the same thing. Do you have an example, sir?
I do, sir, but come on now, man. An invitation and 3 high value client introductions. Folks, did you hear that? And he's crediting that to how he prepared for and was very intentional about how he owned the space. So that's the significance of what we're talking about here today. Neal, the one that comes to my mind right away is a time just a few years ago when I traveled with the Maxwell leadership team on one of the transformation trips. It was actually in Guatemala. And so we're going to a place where people are not even sure why they're there. The audience is various different people there were church people there were business people there were teachers, and even firefighters. And they weren't really sure about what this was really all about. They had heard that Maxwell Leadership was coming to talk about transformation. But one of the things that I did is I made sure to go, when I went in there, to just kind of go around the room and just be one of the people and connect with them. They didn't know who I was, but I just kind of connected with them, Neal. And in fact, I heard a story from one of them in connecting that I was able to actually use in the presentation that we made, that made all the difference in regards to us having a very impactful and meaningful event.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, just these 2 stories that Robin shared with the Maxwell leadership team or myself at the Luxury Real Estate Networking event, these stories prove that presence sets the stage for everything that follows, whether it's going to be potential business or the experience that not only you, but individuals in the audience that they're going to experience, right? That they're going to walk away with. It makes all of the difference for everything else.
So Neal, let's talk about some of the common mistakes that we might make, that people make. We might make these mistakes sometimes without even realizing it.
So there's one big one. If we go back to intentionality, and I know that when we walk into the room, the big one, the first big mistake we make is entering distracted, checking our phone, right? Maybe walking in, looking down, or we're doing the exact opposite of what you did in Guatemala. Instead of looking at everyone and making connection, we are scanning for important people, right? Where I'm looking over people's head and I'm like, okay, well, where's the CEO? Where's the boss? That signals I'm not present or prepared. And if I walk into a room signaling to the room that I'm not really even here or I'm not prepared to be here, that is a huge red flag.
Neal, I did that just yesterday. I was at a networking event, and when I entered the room, I started scanning. I started scanning the room, if I can be honest with you. And so that kind of hit me in between the eyes here as we do this morning. The second
So
one we want to talk
Robin,
about.
real quick, that, ladies and gentlemen, we are not exempt. No one is exempt from these mistakes that are made, because we know this, but even Robin and I, we have to be reminded.
Clearly. So the second one we want to talk about is overcompensating. This is where we might speak too loudly or we might gesture too much. Trying to command attention in an unnatural way, unnatural manner. And it often reads as insecurity instead of confidence. It's not as easy sometimes to see in ourselves, but have you seen it in others, folks? Where people, you can just tell that they're doing unnatural things, and it helps you to see that they're insecure, they're uncertain, they're not sure about themselves as they are in that position, whatever that might be.
So I can't see it in other people, Robin, because I see it in myself too much, right? So in the spaces I'm in, either in coaching or in real estate, where I did not feel like I belonged in the room, and this goes back to that imposter syndrome that we talked about episodes ago. But then me trying too hard, and when people saying, "Hi, how are you?" Well, I'm blessed and highly favored, but that's because I am Neal Oates Jr. I'm a luxury real estate professional, and I try to have all this big thing instead of saying, "I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking." right? And so trying to be more than I had to be when just showing up and being myself would have been enough. So overcompensation, guilty. So you might walk into the room and scan. I'm walking into the room sometimes and overcompensating. So I'm going to go straight into the third one. And that's going to be shrinking. And this one, for many of our listeners who are well capable, this might be the one how you are giving your power away in a room. And that's walking in like you're hoping no one notices you, right? If you could just slip in and slip out quietly. And here's what that sends. That sends the message that you don't belong. And I believe that people, we as human beings, we pick up on that feeling very, very quickly that he or she doesn't believe they belong. And then I will respond in kind to your belief, not my belief, but your belief in saying that you don't think you belong in the room.
So a lot of these that we're talking about obviously are without even speaking a word. So I hope you're capturing that, audience. The key is to replace those habits with intentional cues that communicate your presence from the start. That's what we're talking about today.
So now that we've shared the mistakes we made, as always, we have to go into some practical steps to build presence. So we have a handful of steps here. And so, Robin, if you're okay with it, I would like to start with my first one.
Let's go.
And here's what I believe. I believe that step one is to master your entrance, right? Jim Rohn would always say, if you don't know where to start at the beginning. And so I believe mastering your entrance, even something as simple as your first 2 or 3 steps into a room can set the tone. That's my belief.
Did you hear that, folks? Even in your first 2 or 3 steps into a room, right? I agree with you, sir. And that's something that often I do not think about. But if we are intentional about our first 2 or 3 steps into a room, we're already starting to communicate presence. The second one that we want to talk about is use stillness strategically. So here we're talking about pauses, calm movements, and deliberate gestures that give weight to your presence.
Robert, why am I not surprised that you would be the one talking about using stillness strategically, right? Mr. Let's be deliberate. Mr. Let's pause and slow down. Fits right in line with your personality and everything you believe, even as we talk about building and living the big life. So
Right on.
I'm going to move to step 3. And Robin mentioned this one when he and the Maxwell leadership team were in Guatemala and the impact it had not only on him, but the team and the experience of the attendees. And step 3 is to make real connections before the conversation, right? If we aren't careful, we'll just jump right into the conversation without ever connecting. So make real connections before the conversation. Greet people warmly. Acknowledge their presence. And here's the one that I love, especially having a military dad, Robin. Establish eye contact that says, see you, right? Even without the verbal part. And this is such a big thing. If I can look at you and if our eyes connect and that thing on the inside says, hey, brother, hey, sister, I see you. I recognize you. I think that's a big one.
Yeah, right on. It is a big one. It goes a long way, actually. And the fourth one is consistency. Your presence shouldn't depend upon the perceived importance of the room. So you want to show up the same way, whether there's one person in the room or 100 or 500.
Robin, can we just pause right here for a moment? Have you ever been guilty of looking at the size of the audience or the room and said, I think I can get away with 20% here. I think I don't have to show up consistently here. And I'm going to leave that question with you as I tell you one of mine. I was teaching in Tampa, and I think 2 weeks before I taught there, I had taught there previously 2 weeks prior. And we had maybe 60 people in the room, and the energy was electric, and I was on. And I showed up this time to present, but little did I know that they had a bigger, better class in the big room, and they had put me in the small room. I was used to being in the big room, Robin. So I walk into the room, and the coordinator comes over and says, Neal, we have 5 registrants today. And I'm like, 5? Like 1, 2, 3, like before 6, after 4, 5? And he was like, yeah. He says, but 3 of them went into the other room over there because they registered for that one. And so they've asked for a refund. And so now I'm like, you're telling me I'm going to have 2 people in this class. Now, the other class was more important because that's when a lot of changes were happening in our real estate industry. And a lot of people didn't know. I would have rather been in the other room as well because it was timely. But Robin, I'm sitting here for a split second. 2 people? Man, I can I don't even need to show up big. I don't need to give my all. I don't need to be consistent. But that quickly turned over into let me give my best as if I was speaking to a full room, make sure that they have the best experience. And it was a great experience. And that's when I learned something about myself that day in Tampa, Robin. What about you?
Yeah, definitely. So not the same thing, but the idea of, sometimes you're expecting a large room or larger room, and you end up with a small percentage of what you're expecting. And the reality is that there are many times where it's happened where that 1 or 2 people that were in the room, that we continued in the same manner as if it were 50, where that those 1 or 2, it was a meaningful experience that they continued, and it made an impact in their lives, and in the long run an impact in mine as well, no question.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Robin mentioned number 4, consistency. So make sure you show up consistent, irregardless of the perceived value of the room. And then step 5, I'm going to highlight or mention, and I think this is one that we attempt to discuss frequently here, and that's prepare mentally, right? In everything, but especially before we go into a room, prepare mentally. Visualize the space, rehearse the feeling that you want to bring into it, and then just remind yourself that you belong there and why you belong in that room.
Yeah, that's very good. So you're preparing yourself mentally as well. So Neal, what advice would you give someone? It's somebody's listening to us today and they feel like, well, man, owning the space, owning the presence. I'll never even. This is the first time I'm even thinking about this, and so they might be starting from scratch, right? What advice would you give that person?
Well, we mentioned earlier, start from the beginning, and that starts small with small everyday rooms. And this could be a team meeting, it could be something as simple as a casual gathering, or maybe even a coffee shop interaction. Practice your posture. Right, sit up straight. So I find myself even doing that here on the podcast, making sure that I'm sitting up. I know people are like, "What's wrong with him?" It could be eye contact, and then intentional greetings until those things become second nature. Until you have the right posture, eye contact, intentional greetings. We want that to really become second nature. And then we just want to layer in that mental prep work that I just referred to, reminding yourself of your value before every interaction.
That's good stuff. And what I would add to that, folks, is get feedback, right? So ask people that you trust, like, what do you notice about me? What do you notice about my presence? Ask that question. And sometimes that you might think that you're sending a certain message. I've been there. My wife has shared this many
That's
times.
exactly what I was going to say, Robin. I'm about to say our spouses will tell us what message we're actually sending, won't
Yeah.
they?
Yeah. So I think ask for feedback. That's a good one.
And ladies and gentlemen, Robin and I, we say ask for feedback. That is not the easy thing to do, but it is necessary if we want to improve, if we really want to own the rooms that we enter. And then here's why it's so important to practice and then to ask for feedback, because we know this is a journey. And presence that we're talking about is built like a muscle. Consistent reps, reflection, refinement, feedback, right? That's what we want to do. We want to build our presence muscle. And the beauty is that once we master it, we'll carry it everywhere naturally. And then we aren't tasked, or we aren't feeling that thing that Robin mentioned earlier, that unnatural feeling or overcompensating. When we can show up in a room and carry it everywhere naturally, differences happen.
And that's huge. What we've shared with you today, anybody can practice. That's what I want you to hear, because you might be hearing this today and you're thinking to yourself, I'm not so good. There's some people that are good at that kind of stuff. They're just born that way and they do that naturally, but that's not me. I'm uncomfortable even talking, much less being concerned or deliberate or intentional about how I show up. But what everything, and I would encourage you, if that's you, to listen to this episode again, because everything that we've shared here, you can do. And I think Neal just kind of wrapped it up really well when he said, practice, right? It's about developing this muscle. It's about consistent reps. It's about reflection. It's about refinement. It's about doing it over and over and over, being intentional about that. And so that kind of wraps up our conversation today about owning the room. It's such a big subject, because how you own the room is going to play a very major factor in what comes as a result of you being there. And so if you found this helpful today, we ask that you share it with someone who, you might know just by the way that you know them, or maybe you've had conversations that they want to elevate their presence. Please share that with them. We also ask you to subscribe to the podcast so that you won't miss our next episode. And the last one I would like to ask you, sorry, I'm asking you for a lot today, but I'm going to ask you for a review. Can you stop and take the time and just write a review? If whatever that review might say, actually, I'm hoping that it's a positive review. Neal, it dawned on me, maybe it's not going to be a positive review,
Hold
right?
on, Robin. Once again, you are just infectiously optimistic. You just believe, like, hey, write us a review. And he just leaves it there. Ladies and gentlemen, do not listen to Robin Lewis. Listen to Neal Oates. Write a positive review. Robin never, so I love the fact that you never even thought that if someone is listening to us at the end of the podcast where you're making these asks, right, that it would be a bad review. You like, if you're going to leave a bad review, you should have left 2 minutes in.
We do want your feedback, by the way. And if you have some feedback to give us that can help us in any way, we welcome that. But if you have been gaining from this, and a positive review actually helps from the vantage point that, how these things work with algorithms and so on. I really don't know how they work, but I've been told that if there are positive reviews, it helps it to actually be shared with other people. And that's what Neal and I are about. And that's what you're about. It's about making a positive impact in our community and in our world.
Because Robin and I, we are on the journey of living the big life, but we want to go with you. We want to travel with you as we all seek this thing called the big life, because it is possible, not for others, but for us as well. So we're going to leave you as we always do. And that is that we love you. God loves you. And there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time we see you or you see us, we're right there with you. Peace.
Peace.